It was 3 in the morning when I learned that my own family had a plan for me. I was 71 years old. I had buried a husband 6 months before. And I was standing in a dark hallway in my daughter's house, barefoot on cold tile, listening to a man I once called my son plan the end of my freedom. I want to tell you how I got there. But first I need you to understand who I was before that night, because the man in that room made one mistake. He forgot what I did for a living. My name is Beatrice Holloway. For 40 years I kept the books for small shops all over this county. The flower shop, the hardware store, the little diner on Route 9. I balanced ledgers. I chased pennies. I found the $1 that did not belong in a column of 10,000 that did. People used to laugh at me for it. My husband used to say I could hear a number lie. He was not wrong. Warren and I were married 46 years. He passed in the spring quiet in a hospital bed with my hand in his. When a man you have loved that long is gone, the world goes strange and soft at the edges. You stop trusting your own eyes. You stop trusting your own memory. You lean on the people who say they love you because you cannot stand up straight on your own. That is the moment they were waiting for. Meredith is my daughter, my only child. Douglas is her husband. They live in a converted farmhouse on the edge of town, white-siding a wide porch, a barn out back they never use. 2 weeks after the funeral, Meredith sat beside me on my own sofa and took my hand. "Mom, you cannot stay in this house alone," she said. "It is too big. It is too much. Come live with us. Let us take care of you." Her voice was soft. Her eyes were wet. And I, who could hear a number lie, could not hear my own daughter. I said yes. I sold some furniture. I packed my life into boxes. I left the house Warren and I had paid off over 30 years, the house where I raised her, the house where he died, and I moved into their spare room with the cream curtains and the bed that was too soft. I kept the house, though. I did not sell it. I want you to remember that. The house was mine, paid in full, free and clear. It mattered later more than I ever imagined. The first week felt kind. That is the cruel part. Douglas carried my boxes up the stairs. Meredith cooked my favorite pot roast. My granddaughter Hannah, who was 16, showed me her school projects and let me braid her hair like I did when she was small. Then on the 5th or 6th day, Douglas came to me with a folder and a gentle smile. "Beatrice, I hate to bring this up," he said, "but with Warren gone, there is paperwork. Estate things. The lawyers need someone to handle the small stuff, so you do not have to carry it. Meredith is a wreck. Let me take that weight off you. Just sign here and here and here." There was a woman at the kitchen table I had never met. He said she was a notary, a friend doing him a favor. I did not read the pages. I want to say that plainly because I am ashamed of it. I, Beatrice Holloway, who never signed a receipt without reading it twice, signed a stack of papers I never read. I was tired. I was grieving. I trusted the man who was smiling at me. I signed a durable power of attorney, broad as the sky. It gave Douglas the right to touch my money, my accounts, and my property. All of it. I did not know that yet. I only knew that signing felt like being taken care of, and being taken care of felt like drowning slowly in warm water. After that, the kindness changed shape. It got teeth. Douglas started sorting my medicine into a plastic box, one little compartment for each day. "So you do not get confused," he said in the voice you use for a child. I had never once been confused about my pills. I told him so. Meredith touched my arm and said, "Mom, it is just easier this way." The word confused went into the air and stayed there like smoke. Then the mail. My bank statements came to the house pre-opened. When I asked, Meredith blamed the mailman. But I saw how Douglas read them at the counter, slow, his eyes moving down every line. A bookkeeper notices who reads the mail. Then the phone. My friends stopped hearing back from me because my messages were not getting through. The internet password changed and no one would tell me the new one. "The router is acting up," Douglas said. "I will fix it this weekend." The weekend came. The weekend went. The router was never broken. I was the thing being broken. Piece by piece, they cut my strings. My friends, my mail, my money, my voice. I was becoming a woman in a house who could not reach the outside world. And the worst part was how normal it looked from the porch. A nice family. A grieving mother. A son-in-law who sorted her pills. I told myself I was imagining it. Grief does that. It makes you doubt the floor under your feet. But some old part of me, the part that spent 40 years finding the dollar that did not belong, kept whispering, "Something here does not add up, Beatrice. Something here does not add up. So I did the only thing I have ever known how to do when the numbers feel wrong. I started keeping a record. I found a small notebook, a plain one black cover in the bottom of a moving box. No computer, no internet, just my hand and a pen. And every night after the house went quiet, I wrote things down. The date Douglas took my checkbook to organize it. The Tuesday my Social Security deposit was smaller than it should have been. The pages he had me sign. The exact words. I did not know why I was doing it. Call it 40 years of habit. Call it instinct. I only knew that when something does not add up, you write it down and you wait for the number to confess. It confessed on a Thursday. No, it confessed on the Wednesday night before a Thursday. Let me tell it the way it happened. That evening felt almost warm. We had roast chicken. Douglas poured my water and asked if the meat was dry. Hannah talked about a history report. For 1 hour, the table felt like a family. But I had learned to read the little looks between Douglas and Meredith, the quick ones, the ones that spoke a language I was not allowed to know. I went to bed early and pretended to be tired. I was not tired. I was listening. I had noticed that the real conversations in that house happened after I went upstairs, as if my body in a chair kept them from speaking freely. Near 3 a.m, I heard Douglas's voice through the floor, low, easy, pleased with itself. I got out of bed. I did not turn on a light. I walked to the top of the stairs on the sides of my feet the way you walk when you do not want the wood to speak. He was in the study with the door not quite closed, a phone against his ear, his back to the hall. I could not hear all of it. I want to be honest about that. I did not hear a full confession laid out neat. I heard pieces. Broken glass on the floor of the dark. The hearing is Thursday, he said. Morning, it is handled. A pause. She already signed. Months ago, she does not even remember doing it. Another pause. A soft laugh that turned my stomach. The doctor's declaration is done. Foster took care of it. By the time she understands what is happening, it will be over. Then the worst thing. Not a threat. Something calmer than a threat. Do not worry about her. After Thursday, she will not be able to stop any of it. I stood there in the dark, and my heart hit my ribs so hard I was sure he could hear it. Thursday. A hearing. A doctor's declaration. Something I signed. Something that after Thursday I would not be able to stop. A younger woman might have run right then, screamed, called someone. But I was not young, and I was not a screamer. I was a bookkeeper. And a bookkeeper does not trust the story. A bookkeeper checks the ledger, so I did not go back to bed. I waited. I stood in that hallway until I heard him hang up, until I heard the study light click off, until I heard his feet on the stairs, until I heard the door of his and Meredith's bedroom close. I counted his breaths in my head the way I count columns. I waited until the house was fully asleep. Then I went down. The study smelled of coffee and cold cigarettes. His desk was a mess to anyone else. To me, it was a set of books waiting to be read. There was a fireproof box under the desk with the lid not latched. There were folders in the bottom drawer, and I, who had read 10,000 messy desks, sat down in his chair in the dark, tilted a folder toward the window, and let the moonlight do the rest. The first thing I found stopped my breath. It was a loan document, a mortgage, against a house with an address I knew better than my own name because it was my own name on the deed. My house, the one that was paid off, free and clear. Someone had borrowed a large sum of money against it, a very large sum. And the borrower, acting on my behalf under a power of attorney, was Douglas. My paid-off house. My 40 years of work. He had turned it into a bank he could withdraw from, and the withdrawal had already been made. I sat very still. I did not cry. Crying is for later. When the number is finally in front of you, you do not cry, you read. The second folder was worse, and it was smarter, and it told me exactly what Thursday was. It was a petition. A court petition for emergency guardianship. Guardianship of the person in the estate of Beatrice Holloway. In plain words, a request to have the court declare me unable to run my own life and to put Douglas in charge of me. My body, my money, my house, everything. And clipped to it was a sworn statement from a doctor named Foster, my own family doctor, declaring that I suffered significant cognitive decline and could not make safe decisions for myself. There was a hearing date stamped at the top. Thursday, morning. An emergency hearing, the kind that can happen fast, the kind where the person being judged does not always get to be in the room. And then, sitting there in his chair with the whole shape of it laid out in front of me, I understood the piece that had not made sense. Why go to all this trouble for guardianship when he already had my power of attorney? Why both? Because I could take the power of attorney back. That is the thing about a power of attorney. As long as your mind is sound, you can revoke it any day you choose. One letter, one signature, gone. The moment I woke up and read those papers, I could cancel his access, and I could drag him into court over that stolen loan, and he knew it. Unless a judge declared that my mind was not sound. That was the whole game. That was Thursday. If the court named him my guardian, then my signature meant nothing anymore. I could not revoke anything. I could not sue anyone. I could not even choose where I slept. A woman under guardianship is a woman with no voice the law will hear. He would own the loan, the house, the pension, and me and every protest I made would only prove how confused poor Beatrice had become. The kindness in that first week, the signing, the pills, the confused dropped into every conversation like seeds. It was not cruelty for its own sake. It was construction. He was building a case. Brick by brick, day by day, he was building the story of a woman losing her mind, so that on Thursday morning a judge would look at the file and see exactly what Douglas wanted him to see. I had been keeping a record of a crime while the criminal kept a record of my decline. 2 ledgers, his and mine. And Thursday was the day his ledger was supposed to win. Here is what he forgot. He forgot that I could read. I did not wake anyone. I did not confront him. You do not tip your hand when you are holding the losing seat and the winning cards are still on the table. Instead, I took out my phone, the one thing in that house that still worked because it did not need his internet to use a camera, and I photographed every page. The loan, the petition, Foster's sworn statement, the date at the top. Page after page, holding my breath, my hands shaking so hard the first 3 shots came out blurred and I had to do them again. I put every folder back exactly the way I found it, corner to corner, edge to edge. A bookkeeper knows how to leave a desk looking untouched. Then I went back upstairs and I made a decision. I was not going to be in that house on Thursday. Understand me, I was not running away scared. I was running toward the one thing that could save me. If I stayed, the hearing could happen with me painted as a fragile old woman who did not even show up or showed up rambling, and grief struck easy to declare incompetent. But if I got out, if I got to a lawyer, if I walked into that courtroom on my own 2 feet, clear-eyed with photographs of a stolen mortgage in my hand, then I was not a victim to be managed. I was a witness. And a witness is a very different thing than a ward. I did the math the way I do all my math, cold and careful at the bedroom desk with the door locked. It was a little after 3. Douglas had said the hearing was Thursday morning. It was now the small hours of Wednesday. That gave me most of 2 days. Not much, but enough if I moved now and moved smart. I packed a small bag. Not much. 2 changes of clothes. My medicine, the real bottles, not his plastic box. My documents, my identification, my social security card, the deed to the house, all the things I had quietly kept in a folder in my closet because some old instinct never let me hand every original to anyone. $500 in cash I kept for emergencies. And 2 things that mattered more than all the rest. A backup drive with 40 years of my old client books on it because a woman who can prove she managed thousands of accounts is not a woman who forgets her own pills. And the black notebook, my ledger. The record I had been keeping since the first week in my own hand dated detailed waiting. I did not know it yet, but that notebook was going to matter more than anything else I carried out of that house. Keep it in your mind. I will come back to it. I dressed in dark, quiet clothes and my softest shoes. I checked my folder twice. Identification, deed, cash, photograph safe on the phone, and a slip of paper where months ago, out of pure habit, I had written down the phone number of Walter Briggs, the lawyer who had handled things for Warren and me for years. Walter was honest. Walter was sharp. If anyone could stand between me and Thursday, it was him. The front door had an alarm Douglas armed every night. He had told me it was for safety. Now I understood it was a fence. But my bedroom was over the kitchen, and off the kitchen was the side door to the yard, and that door was on a different older lock, the kind you turn by hand. I had watched Meredith take the trash out that way a dozen times. It did not beep. It did not chirp. It just opened. I waited until the sky at the window went from black to the first thin gray. I did not want the deep dark when a light in the yard would wake a dog 3 houses down. I wanted the gray hour when a woman walking looks like an early riser and nothing more. I carried my shoes in my hand down the stairs. I stepped on the sides of the treads near the wall where old wood does not creak. Kitchen, counter, side door. My fingers found the lock and turned it slow a quarter-turn half all the way, and the door came open with a small breath of cold morning air that smelled of wet grass and someone's wood smoke. And then a light came on upstairs. I froze in the doorway, 1 foot on the kitchen tile, 1 foot on the step down to the yard. Above me a floorboard groaned. Water ran in a pipe inside the wall. A toilet. Douglas or Meredith up in the night, 10 feet of ceiling, and 1 bad decision away from finding my bed empty and the side door open. I did not breathe. I stood in that doorway between the warm house and the cold yard, and I counted. 1, 2, 3. The water shut off. Footsteps crossed a floor. A door closed. A bed took a body's weight with a soft complaint of springs, and then blessed an ordinary silence. I let out the breath I had been holding. Then I stepped down into the yard, pulled the door shut behind me an inch at a time, and I was outside in the gray and the cold 71 years old with a bag on my shoulder and my whole life in a folder and a phone. I did not look back at the house. There was nothing in it for me anymore. I walked across the wet grass to the side gate, the one they never locked because it was only for the trash, and I let myself out onto the empty street. Nadine Pruitt lived 9 blocks away. Nadine ran the flower shop on Elm for 30 years, and I kept her books for 20 of them, and in all that time I never once found $1 out of place in her drawer, because Nadine Pruitt was the most honest woman I ever met. Years ago she had told me, "Beatrice, my door is open to you day or night, I do not care the hour." I was about to find out if she meant it. 9 blocks is nothing in a car. On foot before dawn with a bag at 71, it is a country. I walked steady, not fast close to the hedges the way you walk when you do not want a face in a window to remember you. The streetlights dropped their yellow circles every 50 feet, and I moved from one to the next like stones across a river. My heart was still going hard, but under the fear there was something else, something I had not felt in 6 months, something I had almost forgotten the shape of. I felt like myself. For half a year I had been a passenger in my own life, told when to eat, told what to take, told gently over and over that I was confused. And now here I was in the cold gray morning deciding every single step and not one soul on this earth telling me I could not. At the 5th block I had to stop. I sat on the low edge of a brick planter and let my breath catch up to me. And sitting there in the empty street, the whole size of it landed on me at once. A 71-year-old widow in the dark running from her own daughter's house because the family that said it loved her had gone to court to take her mind, her money, and her home. If a client had brought me those numbers, I would not have believed the total. But I had checked the math myself. Twice. The total was true. I got up. I kept walking. And when the church clock down on Main struck the hour, I was standing on Nadine Pruitt's porch under the little light she always left burning, raising my hand to knock about to pull one honest woman out of a warm bed and into a war. I did not know yet how deep it went. I did not know about the money that had already moved to a doctor. I did not know there had been a woman before me, a woman named Frances who did not get out. I did not know that my own daughter was not the villain I was so sure she was. I only knew 3 things standing on that porch in the gray. My name was Beatrice Holloway. Somebody had decided I was easy, and they had picked the wrong woman to steal from. I knocked, 3 soft taps, and I waited. The locks came undone one at a time, 3 of them. Then the door opened, and there was Nadine Pruitt in her robe, her gray hair loose, her eyes puffy with sleep. She looked at me. She looked at the bag on my shoulder. She looked at my face. And whatever she saw there wiped the sleep right out of her. "Beatrice," she said, "get in here, right now." She pulled me inside and shut the door, and threw all 3 locks behind me. She sat me down on her sofa. She put a blanket over my knees before I could say a word. And then for the first time since 3 in the morning, I let go. I did not sob. I am not built that way. But the tears came hot and quiet, and Nadine sat beside me and held my hand and did not ask a single question until I was ready. When I could talk, I told her all of it. The papers I signed while I was drowning in grief. The pills, the mail, the internet. The phone call through the floor. The loan against my house. The petition to take my mind and my money on Thursday morning. Nadine listened. And as I talked, I watched her face go from soft to hard like clay setting in the sun. "Those people," she said when I finished. "Those people." She stood up. She walked to her kitchen. She came back with 2 cups of tea and put one in my hands. Then she said the thing I have never forgotten. "Beatrice, listen to me. They are trying to make the world believe you have no sense left in your head. That is their whole plan. To turn you into a woman nobody listens to." She sat back down. She looked me dead in the eye. "But you are a bookkeeper. You have spent 40 years making numbers tell the truth whether they wanted to or not. So we are not going to argue with them. We are going to let the numbers talk. I have known Nadine Pruitt for 30 years. I have never loved her more than I did at that moment. I did not sleep much. Who could? But I lay in Nadine's guest bed with my notebook open on my chest, and I made a plan the way I make everything in order one line at a time. When the sun was properly up, I called Walter Briggs. Walter had done the legal work for Warren and me for 15 years. He knew our house. He knew our accounts. He knew better than anyone alive except me that my mind was sound. I told his assistant it was an emergency, and I meant it. And by 9 that same morning, Wednesday morning, I was sitting across a desk from him with my folder open and my phone in my hand. Walter is a big, quiet man with white hair and glasses he takes off when he is about to say something serious. He took them off while I talked. He looked at the photographs of the mortgage. He looked at the photographs of the petition. He read Foster's sworn statement twice, and when he set the phone down, his jaw was tight. "Beatrice Bira," he said, "I want you to hear me clearly because you are going to need to trust me for the next few weeks. What this man has done is not a family disagreement. It is a set of crimes. And the only good news is that he moved too fast and left too much on paper." "Tell me what to do," I said. "First," Walter said, "we take the gun out of his hand today, right now. You are of sound mind, and that means you can revoke that power of attorney with a signature, and once you do, he loses every bit of legal cover he has been hiding behind." He was already pulling forms from a drawer. "We sign the revocation. We send certified notice to your bank. We send it to the county recorder where your house is filed. By the end of the day, if he tries to move one more dollar in your name, the bank has it in writing that his authority is gone." I signed. My hand did not shake this time. Then Walter kept going, and this is the part I need you to understand because it is where the whole thing turned. "Second," he said, "the hearing. He filed for an emergency guardianship for tomorrow morning. Emergency so it can happen fast and so it can happen without you in the room. He is counting on that. He is counting on a judge looking at a file full of the word confused, seeing an empty chair where you should be, and signing an order in 90 seconds. He put his glasses back on. "So we are going to do the one thing he never planned for. We are going to walk you into that courtroom tomorrow on your own 2 feet sharp as a tack and let the judge see for himself exactly who Beatrice Holloway is." "And the doctor," I said. "Foster, he swore I was losing my mind. I have not been to his office in months." Walter smiled for the first time. "Then that," he said, "is a lie we can prove. We will get you a real evaluation from a real doctor independent court respected. A man named Aldrich. But that will take a couple of weeks to schedule and do properly, and I will not rush it because I want it airtight. For tomorrow, we do not need it. For tomorrow, we just need you breathing and thinking, standing where he swore you could not stand. I want to be honest about the timeline because it matters. Everyone thinks these things get fixed in an afternoon. They do not. Walter told me the truth. Tomorrow's hearing would not end the war. At best, it would stop the ambush. The real fight, the full hearing where everything came out, would be weeks away, and Douglas would use every one of those weeks to build his story taller. But tomorrow we could keep him from winning it all in the dark. That night back at Nadine's, I could not sit still, so I did what I always do. I opened my books. I had the backup drive. 40 years of client ledgers, mine every one of them clean. And I had the black notebook, my record of the last 6 months in that house. I spread it all out on Nadine's kitchen table under the good light, and I started reading my own life the way I would read a stranger's accounts. And a bookkeeper's eye is a strange and stubborn thing, because there in my own handwriting on a Tuesday 6 weeks back, I had written one plain line I had not understood at the time. A withdrawal from my main account, $15,000. Paid out to a name I had copied down because it was on my opened statement, and it did not belong there. The name was a medical billing account. And when I chased that account slow one entry to the next, the way I have chased a missing dollar 1,000 times, it led to the office of my family doctor. Foster, $15,000 of my money had gone to the same doctor who then swore under oath that my mind was gone. I sat back in Nadine's chair and I felt something cold and clean settle over me. This was not a confused old woman misreading her statements. This was a paper trail. He had paid the doctor with my own money to sign a lie about me, and it was written down in my own careful hand 6 weeks before I ever heard him on that phone. I did not know the whole of it yet. I did not know how deep the doctor was in or that there had been someone before me. That would come. But I closed the notebook that night knowing one thing for certain. I was not going to that hearing empty. I was going with a number that could not lie. Thursday came cold and gray. Nadine drove me to the courthouse and Walter met us on the steps. He straightened my collar like a father sending a girl to school. "Remember," he said, "you do not argue, you do not plead, you do not cry. You answer what you are asked plainly, and you let the truth do the heavy lifting. Can you do that?" "Walter," I said, "I have been doing that my whole life." The courtroom was small and bright, and when I walked in, I saw the back of a head I knew, and the head turned, and it was Douglas. I will never forget his face. For half a second before he caught himself, his mouth actually fell open. He had not planned for me. He had filed an emergency petition for a woman who was supposed to be asleep in his spare room, unaware, unable to stop a thing. And here she was in a clean blouse on her lawyer's arm, looking straight at him. Next to him sat Meredith, my Meredith pale and small, and she would not lift her eyes to me at all. The judge was a woman about my daughter's age named Ramsey. She had a flat, careful voice and eyes that missed nothing. She looked at Douglas's petition. She looked at the empty space where a subject who could not appear was supposed to be. And she looked at me standing there, and she said, "Mrs. Holloway, you understand why you are here today." "I do, Your Honor," I said. "My son-in-law has asked this court to declare that I cannot manage my own affairs. I am here to tell you in person that I can." You could have heard the pin drop. Douglas's lawyer, a young one he had scraped together overnight, started to object about my mental state, and Judge Ramsey lifted one finger, and he stopped. "I will decide for myself what state Mrs. Holloway is in," she said by talking to her. "That is rather the point." She asked me questions. Simple ones, then harder ones. The date, the address of my house, what a power of attorney was. What I understood was being asked of me. Then she asked me to explain my own finances, and I did plainly account by account the pension, the savings, the house, the exact figures. I watched her eyebrows go up just slightly. A woman who is losing her mind does not recite her own balances to the dollar. Then Walter stepped in, and quiet as anything he laid it out. That I had revoked the power of attorney the day before. That the petition rested on a sworn medical statement from a doctor I had not seen in months. And that he said we had reason to believe there were serious irregularities in how that statement and certain transactions in Mrs. Holloway's accounts had come about. He did not say the word fraud. He did not have to. Judge Ramsey heard it. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she set down her pen. "I am not going to grant an emergency guardianship today," she said. "Not remotely. The subject is present, she is oriented, and frankly she is sharper than half the attorneys who stand in this room." A soft laugh went around the gallery, and Douglas's neck went red. "What I am going to do is order a full independent evaluation and set this matter for a complete evidentiary hearing so that all of these very serious questions can be answered under oath and on the record." She gave a date, 4 weeks out. Then she looked at Douglas long and cold, and she said, "Until then, no one is to interfere with Mrs. Holloway, her person, or her property. Do we understand each other?" We did. Walking out of that courtroom, I felt like I had grown 6 inches. I had won, not the war, but the first real fight, the one he thought I would never even show up for. I should have known better than to feel safe, because Douglas Rourke was not a man who lost quietly. He was a man who, when the front door closed, went looking for a window. He found the press. By that evening, it was on the local news, and I sat in Nadine's living room and watched my son-in-law stand on his own front lawn in a dark suit and destroy me with a smile. "My mother-in-law," he said into a cluster of microphones, his voice thick with practiced grief, "is a woman I love like my own mother, and she is not well. For months we have watched her slip. The forgetting, the suspicion, the accusations against the family that has done nothing but care for her." He wiped an eye. "This week she left our home in the middle of the night. She is confused and she is frightened, and instead of getting the help she needs, she has been convinced that the people who love her are her enemies. We only want her home. We only want her safe." And beside him, in a soft gray sweater, holding a tissue to her face, stood Meredith, my daughter, crying for the cameras. "Please, Mom," she said, looking right into the lens. "Please come home. We just want to help you. I have taken some hard blows in 71 years. That one landed somewhere new. To see my own child, the baby I nursed, the girl I taught to read, stand in front of the world and call me sick. I had to put my cup down because my hand had started to shake, and this time it was not from cold." Nadine turned the television off. "Do not," she said. "Do not let them get inside your head. That is theater, Beatrice. You know what really happened? But here is the thing about theater. It works." Within the hour, Nadine's niece, a young reporter named Paige Whitfield, called to say the story was everywhere, and that Douglas had hired a new lawyer, a sharp and nasty one named Bennett Cross, the kind who wins by making the truth look complicated. And by the next morning, strangers were calling the newspaper to say they had seen the son-in-law on television, and he seemed so sincere. And was it true the old woman was sick and wandering and making things up? That was the moment I understood the real shape of what I was fighting. Douglas was not just trying to win in court. He was building the same case out here in public that he had built in that house. The confused old woman, the loving family. And every time I spoke up to defend myself, he could point and say, look how paranoid she has become. My courage was being turned into a symptom. So I stopped reacting to him, and I went back to the numbers. Paige Whitfield came to Nadine's kitchen the next day with a notebook of her own, and she was young and quick, and her eyes reminded me of Hannah's. I told her everything slow and clear, and I showed her what I could. But I told her something else, too. I told her I did not want a story built on my word against his, because he would always win that game. I wanted a story built on paper, and I asked her to help me find one particular piece of paper using the kind of public records a reporter can pull, and an old woman cannot. Because that $15,000 to Foster had started a question in my mind, and the question would not sit still. A man does not usually buy a corrupt doctor on his first try. A man that's smooth, that practiced, that ready with the cameras, has done a version of this before. It took Paige 3 days. Then she called me, and her voice had gone quiet. "Beatrice," she said, "I think you need to sit down. There had been a woman, years back before Meredith ever married him, an older woman, a great aunt of Douglas by marriage, a widow with a paid house and a comfortable pension and no children of her own to watch over her. Her name was Frances, and the public record told a short, ugly story in a straight line. Douglas had befriended her when she was grieving and alone. Douglas had been named her agent, then her guardian. And within 18 months, Frances had been moved into a care facility. Her house had been sold. Her accounts had been drained down to nothing, and Frances had died there, quiet, with no one at her side. No charges, no headlines, just a lonely woman, a stack of legal papers, and a house that ended up paying for Douglas's life. I sat at Nadine's table, and I could not speak for a while, because I finally understood that I had never been a family problem that got out of hand. I had been chosen. He had done it before, and it had worked, and he had gone looking for the next grieving widow with a paid house, and he had found her sitting on his own wife's sofa, holding his wife's hand, saying yes. Frances did not get out. I did, and I made myself a promise at that table that whatever happened to me, the world was going to hear her name. I thought that was the bottom of it. It was not. Because there was still one person in that house I had gotten completely wrong, and she was about to prove it. It came through Hannah. My granddaughter had been sending me small, careful messages when she could, a picture of the garden, a line about school, nothing that would look wrong if her father saw her phone. I had told her to be careful, and to believe her own eyes and nothing more. And then one afternoon she asked if she could come to Nadine's just for an hour, and she came and she sat on the sofa where I had cried my first night, and she pulled a folded envelope out of her backpack and put it in my hands. "Grandma," she said, and her voice was shaking. "Mom gave me this. She said to give it only to you. She said she was sorry. She said she could not say it out loud yet, but she wanted you to have it." I opened the envelope. Inside were printed pages, emails, and when I read the dates on them, the room tilted. They were from before, from the winter, from the months when Warren was still alive, still in his hospital bed, still holding my hand. Douglas had been writing to his mother Vivian, planning all of it. The house, the pension, the guardianship. He had picked me out and started his work while my husband was still dying. And Meredith, my Meredith, had somehow gotten hold of these and kept them, and now in the middle of crying on television, had reached out through her own child to slip them to me in the dark. I had spent every day since that phone call certain that my daughter was a villain, that she had chosen his side, chosen the money, chosen to call her mother crazy on the evening news, and she had done some of that. I will not pretend she was clean, but she was also a woman trapped in a house with a man who had planned a crime before her father was even in the ground, a woman scared and broke and buried in his lies. And somewhere down inside her, the daughter I raised was still alive, and she was fighting the only way she dared. I held those pages and I cried again, but it was a different kind of crying. Because the truth is never as simple as a villain and a victim. The truth has folds in it. And my daughter, God help her, was folded in the worst place a person can be between the man she feared and the mother she had wronged. I sent the emails to Walter that same night. He called me within the hour, and I could hear him almost smiling through the phone. "Beatrice," he said, "these are dated before Warren passed. Do you understand what that means? This was not a family reacting in good faith to a mother in decline. This was planned, premeditated. That changes the whole complexion of the case. That is not a worried son-in-law. That is a man who saw a dying husband and a grieving widow and did the math. Did the math." He said it without knowing it was the one phrase that would put steel in my spine. Because doing the math was my whole life. And this man had done it against me coldly months in advance, betting that a 71-year-old widow would never check his figures. He bet wrong. I hung up the phone that night feeling for the first time like I might actually win. I had the mortgage. I had the $15,000 to foster in my own hand. I had Francis. And now I had emails that proved he planned it before my husband was cold. The full hearing was 3 weeks away, and I was walking into it armed. And then near midnight, my phone lit up with a message from Hannah. It was not a picture of the garden. It was 3 lines typed fast the way you type when you are scared. "Grandma, Dad and Grandma Vivian were talking tonight. Foster is scared and backing out, so Dad found a new doctor. Somebody named Barrett. He is paying him to come and say you are incompetent no matter what before the hearing. He said this one will not get cold feet." I read it 3 times. Then I set the phone down on Nadine's table in the same good light where I had first found that $15,000, and I sat very still. He was not finished. He had lost the doctor who signed the first lie, and instead of quitting, he had gone out and bought a second one, a harder one, a man who would swear I was mad no matter how clearly I spoke. The full hearing was coming, and Douglas Rourke was going to walk into it with a doctor for hire and a story he had been rehearsing on television for weeks. I should have been afraid. Part of me was, but the larger part of me, the oldest part, the part that spent 40 years alone at a desk long after everyone had gone home, chasing one wrong number through 10,000 right ones, until it confessed that part of me went quiet and cold and ready. He wanted to fight about whether I was in my right mind. Fine, I would meet him on that ground, because I had been keeping a record since the very first week, and there was one number in it, one I had not told Walter about yet, one I had not told anyone about that was going to bring the whole thing down. But that is Thursday's story, and the courtrooms, and I am getting ahead of myself. That night I only wrote 1 line in my notebook the way I have ended every hard day of my life. I wrote the date. I wrote the name Barrett. And under it, in my own steady hand, I wrote 3 words. Let him come. The next 3 weeks were the longest of my life and the busiest. Douglas did not sit still, and neither did I. He had his new doctor now, Barrett, a man bought to say one thing no matter what he saw. He had Bennett Cross, a lawyer who smiled on the news and called me a tragedy. He had the cameras, and he used them over and over the grieving son-in-law, the frightened family, the poor confused woman who ran off into the night. Every few days there was a new soft, sad interview, and every one of them said the same thing without saying it. Do not listen to her. She is not well. So I did not fight him on television. I let him have the cameras. I took the paper. Walter and I built our case the way I once balanced a year of books for the hardware store slow and stubborn and complete. We had the revoked power of attorney. We had the mortgage he took against my paid house. We had the $15,000 that walked out of my account and into Foster's office 6 weeks before Foster swore I was mad. We had Frances the widow before me with her sold house and her drained accounts and her lonely grave. And we had the emails, the ones Meredith slipped me through Hannah, the ones dated while Warren was still alive, that proved this was not panic. It was a plan. But Walter kept telling me the same thing. Beatrice, all of this is strong. But he is going to walk into that hearing with a doctor who will swear on a stack of Bibles that you are incompetent. Barrett. And a bought expert on a witness stand can do a lot of damage. We need something that does not just outweigh him. We need something that breaks him. I told him I was working on it. I did not tell him what it was yet. I wanted to be sure. A bookkeeper does not announce the missing dollar until she can put her finger on the exact line. First came the evaluation, the real one. Judge Ramsey had ordered it, and Walter had picked the doctor a serious, quiet man named Aldrich with no ties to my family and a reputation the courts respected across the whole state. I sat with him for 3 hours in a plain office with a clock on the wall. He asked me about my life, my late husband, my medicines, my money. He gave me tests. Remember these words. Count backward. Draw this. Tell me what this story means. 3 hours, and at the end of it he took off his glasses much the way Walter did, and he looked at me and he almost smiled. Mrs. Holloway, he said, I am going to write in my report that you are not only competent, you are one of the sharpest people of any age I have evaluated this year. Whoever told this court otherwise was either mistaken or lying, and I do not think from what I see in front of me that they were mistaken. I could have kissed him. I did not. I am a lady. But I wrote his name in my notebook that night with a small star beside it the way I used to mark an account that finally came out clean. Then came Foster, and Foster, it turned out, was a coward, which is the one lucky thing about men like him. Paige Whitfield had kept pulling threads, and the threads led somewhere ugly and human. Foster was drowning in gambling debt. Tens of thousands owed to people who do not send polite letters. And Douglas, who could smell a desperate man the way I can smell a cooked book, had handed him money at exactly the right moment and asked for one small favor in return. A signature. A sworn word. It should have been easy. But once the police started asking questions, once Foster understood that he was looking at prison and the loss of the license he had spent his whole life earning, the fear went the other way. His lawyer reached out to Walter. Foster wanted to talk. Foster wanted a deal. And Foster, to save his own skin, was ready to say under oath that Douglas Rourke had paid him to declare a woman incompetent that he had barely examined at all. That should have been the end of it. It nearly was. But it was not the thing that broke Douglas in that courtroom. The thing that broke him was smaller than all of it. It was one date. And I found it myself. Here is how. I was reading Foster's sworn statement for the 10th time, the one that started this whole nightmare, and my stubborn old bookkeeper's eye snagged on a single line the way it snags on a number that is off by $1. Foster had written the date he examined me. A Tuesday. He swore under oath that on that Tuesday he sat with me in his office and found my mind in ruins. And I knew the second I read it that I had never been in his office that day. Because I knew exactly where I was on that Tuesday. I had been 2 hours away at the cemetery sitting beside Warren's grave. I did not just believe it. I could prove it. Because I am who I am, and I write things down. I went to my notebook, and there it was that whole Tuesday in my own hand. The mileage on Nadine's car because she drove me. The gas we bought on the way with the receipt tucked in the back pocket of the notebook, the time stamped right on it. The flowers I bought at the stand by the cemetery gate receipt stamped too. And when I called the cemetery office, they told me they keep a visitor log at the memorial garden, and yes, my name was in it, signed in my own hand on that Tuesday at that hour, 2 hours from Foster's office. The examination never happened. Not late, not rushed, not sloppy. It never happened at all. Foster had signed a sworn statement about a meeting that existed only on paper, and I could put myself to the hour standing at my husband's grave, while he claimed to be ruining my life in his office across the county. I brought it to Walter, and I watched a slow smile spread across his face, the first real one I had seen from him in weeks. "Beatrice," he said quietly, "you just handed me the whole case. A bought doctor is a scandal. A doctor who swore to an examination that provably never took place on a day the subject can prove she was somewhere else is perjury we can hold up in front of a jury and a judge and God himself. This is the thing that breaks him. And you found it. Not me, not the investigators. You." I told him it was nothing special. It was just what I did. Somebody writes down a number that did not happen, and you find the record that proves it did not happen, and you lay the two side by side, and you let anyone with eyes see the lie. 40 years. That is all it ever was. The full hearing came on a gray morning in the county courthouse. This is Ohio, and Ohio takes a hard line on people who prey on the old, though I did not fully understand how hard until that day. The courtroom was packed. Reporters. 2 women from a senior rights group who had read Page's stories and driven 3 hours to sit in the gallery. Strangers who had seen Douglas on television and come to see how it ended. And on the far side of the room, Douglas in a dark suit and Bennett Cross beside him with his slick briefcase, and behind them, pale and small, my daughter Meredith. Hannah was there too, 16 years old, sitting very straight, her hands folded in her lap. When she caught my eye, she did not smile. She just gave me the smallest nod, the kind that says, I am with you, do not be afraid. I have raised a lot of pride in my life. That nod was the finest of it. Bennett Cross went first, and he was good. I will give him that. He stood and he painted a picture of a loving family and a mother in decline of hard decisions made out of love of a confused widow turned against the people who cared for her by a lonely old neighbor and an ambitious reporter. He called Barrett to the stand his bought doctor, and Barrett sat there in an expensive tie and swore that in his professional opinion I suffered severe cognitive impairment and could not be trusted with my own affairs. I sat still and let him talk, because Walter had taught me the sweetest lesson of all. You do not interrupt a man who is building his own gallows. Then Walter stood up, and quiet and slow, and without ever once raising his voice, he took the whole thing apart. He put Aldrich on the stand, the court's own independent doctor, who said plainly that I was among the sharpest people of any age he had examined, and that whoever claimed otherwise was not being honest. He let Bennett Cross flail at that and get nowhere. Then he put up the money. The $15,000 out of my account into Foster's office 6 weeks before Foster's sworn statement. Traced entry by entry. He put my own bank records beside it and my own notebook line where I had written that withdrawal down the very week it happened, long before I ever knew what it meant. Then he brought in Frances. He laid her out gently, respectfully, but completely. The widow before me. The befriending. The power of attorney, then the guardianship, then the sold house, then the drained accounts, then the care facility, then the lonely death. And he asked the room to notice that every single step Douglas had taken with Frances, he had taken again with me in the same order, like a man following a recipe he had cooked before. Then he put up the emails, dated in the winter, while Warren still breathed. Douglas writing to his mother, Vivian planning the house, the pension, the guardianship, choosing me, while my husband was still dying in his bed. And I watched the faces in the gallery change one by one from curiosity to something colder. Because you can spin a lot of things as love. You cannot spin a man who plans to rob a woman while her husband is still alive. And then last, Walter called Douglas himself to the stand, and he asked him about the date. Mr. Rourke, Walter said, holding up Foster's sworn statement. This document which your petition relied upon states that Dr. Foster examined Mrs. Holloway on this Tuesday. You were present in the household at that time. Can you confirm that this examination took place? Douglas, who was always smooth, said yes. Of course. He remembered the day, he remembered driving her, and Walter let him finish. Then he laid down one after another, the gas receipt, the flour receipt, the cemetery log, the mileage in my notebook, and Nadine Pruitt, who took the stand and swore she had driven me 2 hours to my husband's grave on that exact Tuesday and back, and never once to any doctor. Mr. Rourke, Walter said. Mrs. Holloway was 2 hours away at her husband's grave with receipts and witnesses at the hour. Dr. Foster swore under oath that he was examining her in his office. So I will ask you again. Did that examination take place? The whole room was silent. I have balanced 10,000 columns. I have never in my life watched a total come out as clean as the silence in that courtroom while Douglas Rourke sat with his mouth open and no number left to give. He stammered. He said maybe he had the day wrong. He said maybe Foster made a mistake. And Bennett Cross was on his feet trying to save it, but there was nothing to save because Foster had already made his deal, and Foster's own lawyer had already told the court his client was prepared to admit the whole thing. The examination never happened. Douglas had bought a lie, and the lie had a date on it, and the date was a grave. Judge Ramsey did not need long. She set down her pen and she looked at Douglas the way you look at something you have scraped off your shoe. This petition is denied, she said, permanently and with prejudice. Mrs. Holloway is fully competent and always has been, and this court finds that the guardianship process was used here not to protect a vulnerable adult but to rob one. She ordered the fraudulent mortgage frozen and set aside pending the fraud findings. She ordered every dollar traced and accounted for, and she referred the whole matter, Douglas Foster Barrett, all of it, to the county prosecutor for criminal charges, and she named the detective who would run it a steady older man named Hale. The gavel came down, and I sat there and did not cry because I had promised myself I would not cry in that room, and I keep my promises the way I keep my books. I thought that was the end. I had won, cleanly, completely on the record. But Douglas Rourke had one move left, and it was the ugliest of all, and it is the reason I am telling you this story instead of some other one. Even losing, even facing prison, he tried to hide the money. In the days after the hearing, while the lawyers argued and the police built their file, Douglas quietly set up a trust. A brand new one with an innocent-sounding name run through a friend designed to catch the money he had already pulled out of my house and my accounts before anyone could freeze it. On paper, it looked like nothing. A small new account, a few transfers clean and boring. He was betting that in all the noise, no one would follow a few dull dollars into a dull new trust. He was betting that no one was still watching the ledger that closely. He forgot who he was dealing with. He forgot it right up to the end. Because I had been keeping a record since the first week I walked into that house. Not since the phone call. Not since the hearing. Since the very first week when my husband was barely cold and my son-in-law smiled and slid a stack of papers across the kitchen table. Some old instinct in me, the one that spent 40 years finding the dollar that lied, had smelled something wrong in that house before I could have told you what it was. And so quietly in a black notebook by hand with no computer he could lock and no internet he could cut, I had written down everything. Every transfer, every paper he made me sign, every strange withdrawal, every date. All those months I sat quiet and let him sort my pills and read my mail and call me confused. He thought he was watching a woman fade. He was not. He was watching a woman take inventory. When those few dull dollars slipped into that new trust, they matched entry for entry the very transfers I had written down in my notebook weeks and months before. I laid my record beside the new account, and the line ran straight from my stolen house to his hidden trust with no gap for a lawyer to stand in. I brought it to Walter, and I brought it to Detective Hale, and the trust that was supposed to be his soft landing became the last nail. It proved he knew exactly what he had taken, and exactly where he had hidden it. It proved the whole thing from the first smiling signature had been theft. Understand what that means. All those scenes at the start, the ones where I looked like a helpless old woman letting it happen. Me signing the papers. Me letting him sort my medicine. Me sitting quiet at that table while they traded their little looks. I was never helpless. I was writing it down. The frail grandmother they thought they were managing had been keeping the books on her own robbery the entire time. They picked the one kind of victim who spends her life making numbers confess. Douglas Rourke pleaded out in the end because there was nothing left to fight with. In Ohio, what he did has hard names and hard time. Financial exploitation of an elderly person. Forgery. Perjury for the sworn statement about a day I stood at a grave. Theft. Conspiracy because his mother Vivian was in those emails beside him. And because of Francis, because he had done it before to a woman who did not get out. The court had no mercy left to spend. He was sentenced to 8 years in a state prison. Bennett Cross went back to smiling on some other case. And Douglas went away. Foster lost his medical license the same month and took a lesser sentence for his cooperation, which was more than he gave Francis, and more than he tried to give me. Barrett II, bought doctor, never testified to his lie in the end, but the state medical board opened its own case, and his name stopped meaning doctor to anyone who could read a headline. Vivian was questioned and questioned again. She was old and careful and never charged, but a no-contact order followed her out of the courtroom, and she moved to another state, and I have not heard her voice since, which suits me fine. The hardest part was never the villains. It was my daughter. Meredith was not charged. The prosecutor looked hard at those emails, but the truth was plain in them. She was in the house, not in the plan. She had been frightened and broke and buried under a man who planned crimes while her father died, and somewhere in the worst of it, she had turned and reached out through her own child and handed me the very pages that sank him. That does not erase the woman crying on television that she wanted her sick mother home. Both things are true. She hurt me and she saved me, and she has to carry both for the rest of her life. So do I. She came to Nadine's door on a rainy afternoon a month after the sentencing, thin and gray, and I let her in because she was still my girl. We sat a long time and said very little. Then she said, "Mom, I do not know how to ask you to forgive me." And I told her the truest thing I know. Forgiveness is not a thing you ask for. It is a thing you earn slow with honesty over years. I told her Douglas was gone and the consequences were hers to live now, and that if she truly wanted her mother back, she would have to prove it, not with tears on a lawn, but with a life. She has been trying ever since. She got a second job to pay down the debt he left her. She started seeing someone who helps her understand how she let a man talk her into betraying her own blood. She comes for lunch on Sundays now, and she asks before she comes, and she respects the door when I close it. It is not what we were. It may never be. But it is real, and real is worth more than the pretty thing we had before, because the pretty thing was hiding a rot. Hannah came to live with me. That part was simple in the end. She was 16 when it started, and 17 when the papers were signed, old enough that the court listened hard to what she wanted, and what she wanted was her grandmother. A social worker helped us make it right, and legal slow and proper. No rushing, and by the time she turned 18, she was mine to keep, and I was hers. She told me one night doing her homework at my kitchen table that she wanted to study the law, the kind that protects old people from what almost happened to me. I did not cry. I am getting better at not crying. But it was close. With the money the court clawed back, and with my own house finally free and clear again, cleaned of his fraudulent loan, I did the thing I should have done from the start. I bought a small place of my own. Not big. I did not want big. A little house with a good kitchen and a yard with room for tomatoes and roses and the herbs I like. Every morning I go out and I water them, and I think about how close I came to losing everything to a man who mistook a quiet woman for an empty one. I wrote a book. I did not mean to. Paige Whitfield asked after the letters started coming, hundreds of them from old people all over the country who had a son-in-law or a nephew or a friendly stranger reading their mail and sorting their pills and calling them confused. I sat down at my new desk and I wrote it all out plain the way I have told it to you, and I called it what it was. The story of a woman they thought was easy who turned out to keep very good books. It sold more than I ever dreamed. Not because I am a writer. I am not. Because it was true, and because there are so many of us, so many quiet old people sitting in spare rooms in nice houses while someone smiles and slides papers across a table. I started a small foundation with what the book earned. We help families untangle these messes before they become tragedies. We teach old people how to read the papers they are asked to sign, how to keep their own records, how to hear the number that lies. Frances never got that help. I make sure her name is in everything we do. She did not get out, but because of her others have. I am 73 now. My hair is all white. My hands show every one of my years. But my mind is clear as a bell, and my books are clean, and my door locks with my own key that no one else holds. Sometimes at night I think about that hallway. 3 a.m, barefoot on cold tile, listening to a man plan the end of me through a door not quite closed. I remember how sure he sounded. So handled. So done. She will not be able to stop any of it. And I remember the thing he never once considered the thing that saved my house and my mind and my life. That the frail old woman down the hall, the one he was so certain he had managed, had been sitting quiet in her room every night with a black notebook and a steady hand writing it all down. They thought they had found the perfect victim. A grieving widow. A paid-off house. A quiet woman who signed what she was told. What they found in the end was a bookkeeper. And a bookkeeper never forgets that in every set of lies, no matter how neat, there is always one number that does not belong. You just have to be patient. You just have to keep your records. You just have to be willing when the moment comes to lay the truth down on the table where everyone can see it, and let it speak. I laid mine down, and it spoke, and I have been free ever since.